So before I jump into the video today about giants, I just wanted to take 10 seconds out here at the beginning to tell my son, Benjamin, happy birthday. Happy birthday, kiddo. Your mother loves you, I love you, and I can't tell you just how proud we are of the kind, fun-loving, polite, and just wonderful, amazing young man you are turning out to be. I hope your birthday is awesome, and I love you with all my heart. All right, today I want to talk about one of the most famous monsters in all of Dungeons and Dragons with the giant. Giants have served as an integral monster for storytellers throughout all of human history, really, as they've appeared in Greek epics, Chinese mythology, folk tales like Jack and the Beanstalk, the Bible, of course, with the most famous being the story of David and Goliath, and they even appear in the book of Enoch as the Nephilim, a giant race born of fallen angels who have laid with human women, who of course were the inspiration for the Nephilim, a half-angel, half-demon spawn from my beloved Diablo series by Blizzard. As far as the D&D 5e table, giants are one of the easiest monsters to slide into any campaign. They're big, they're scary, and they can be used by dungeon masters as allies, and they come in plenty of flavors, if you will, for any region or terrain type your party might be traversing over the course of a campaign. Now, just in case you are unfamiliar, Wizards of the Coast released an incredible adventure back in 2016 called Storm King's Thunder, which is literally an entire campaign revolving around giants as its central theme. And I have actually ran this adventure book from start to finish twice with different groups of players, and it's easily one of my favorite campaign books released by Wizards to date. Link down below if you guys do end up wanting to check it out for yourself. And so today I want to talk about how to kill your party with giants, as well as how to change up your presentation of these wonderful monsters to keep your players on their heels. As always, let's start with giants as we know them now in the default setting of the Forgotten Realms. To understand giants better as a dungeon master, we can look to their history, and giants on Toril are the definition of historical. That's due to the fact that giants are the oldest known race throughout all of Faerun. They are believed to be the very first settlers on Toril and were a part of a vast-reaching empire called Ostoria. You can sort of think of this like Rome. It really did spread over almost the entirety of the world of Toril. And because of this, dungeon masters looking to include any spelunking and looting of ancient giant cities really can feel free to slap down a Skyrim-esque dungeon dive anywhere they want to along the Sword Coast. Not long after the giants arrived on Toril, however, the dragons arrived, or maybe it was vice versa. And it didn't take long for the giants and dragons to be embroiled in an all-out war called the 1,000-Year War, which ended with both the dragons' population and the giants' huge empire of Ostoria having been reduced greatly. This, of course, paved the way for newer races like dwarves and elves and eventually humans to have their own places to settle and expand. This is a really great tone setter for dungeon masters, I think, because we can really see how giants as a race view younger races like humans. While some giants might even respect the vast level for which humans have created and conquered and claimed, giants have this sort of been there, seen that worldview that skews any interactions they may have with humans and other newer races. Even if the PCs try to befriend and ally themselves with giants to seek their aid with the task, there's a good chance a giant isn't going to place the same value on that task's completion. Giants are old, as in their lifespans surprisingly mimic that of a dwarf's quite closely. They will reach maturity at about age 50, more or less the same age as dwarves, and their total life expectancy is about 300 to 400 years as well, also very dwarf-like. However, some claim that stone giants in particular can live even all the way up to 1,000 years or more. Giants know their history and their place in it. Giants typically worship the giant god Anam the Allfather, who is the creator of all giants and giant kin. Some giants can trace their lineage even back 9 to 10 generations or more, and will often recite this list of ancestors to other giants when they first meet. The reason being is that this can be used as a tool for how the giants will end up treating each other. If a feud was had between their ancestors 7 generations back, that feud would likely continue upon hearing the offending names in the introduction of the other giant, and the same goes for friendships as well. Giants respect the ordning. The ordning, in short, is a hierarchy of giants by race and where they stand in said hierarchy. This ordning is set by Anon the Allfather, and it's quite literally a list of which giants should respect which giants. And if you're a dungeon master, a little shortcut to remember this is it's basically by CR, with titans followed by storm giants on top and hill giants on the bottom, followed by giant kin and eventually ogres. There are a few exceptions, like the newer stat block of fog giants, for example, but if you need to look it up for any reason for campaign building, you can find the ordning on the Forgotten Realms wiki while designing your campaign. And finally, giants are surprisingly solitary creatures typically. Sure, clans exist, but in the setting of the Forgotten Realms, you are far more likely to find these behemoths out on their own rather than in large clusters or cities. Now, that can obviously lead us to a great road of storytelling reasons for why your players might come across 5 or 6 or even 24 gathered together. Perhaps for nefarious means or for even more personal means of survival. Okay, so now that we've covered a bit about giant facts, if you will, let's talk about strategies and ways dungeon masters can implement giants at the D&D table. One of the first tips I have for DMs is to not be afraid to utilize their size in really creative ways. In particular, the standard stat blocks I've found in the basic rules and in the monster manual are kind of terrible at this. I cannot recommend enough running the variant stat blocks found in Storm King's Thunder if you happen to have access to that book, or perhaps have even unlocked that content on D&D Beyond or whatever virtual tabletop platform you use like Fantasy Grounds or Roll20. Both the variant Cloud Giant as well as the Stone Giant have a particularly powerful ability with them called Fling. And to put it short, every single one of my giants, until the end of time, have this attack. Not only does it make a lot of sense from a logical point of view, but it also allows for the giants to break up the flow of combat and how a party approaches a fight with a giant. Barbarians entering into a rage even risk losing that rage with a bit of battlefield removal, and I'll tell you from experience, it will catch the players by surprise when their characters are suddenly grabbed and flung 60 feet away. And of course, feel free to make up your own attacks in this regard with similar effects. You can give your giants the ability to kick and punt players away 20 yards. You can give your giant club attacks a pushback or a knockdown effect as well. And don't be afraid to make these DCs really high numbers either. The Fire Giant variant has a DC 19 strength save for their tackle ability, and that ability is passive and triggers automatically when a creature enters into their threatened space for the first time. Abilities like this have the added bonus of highlighting strength saves for your PCs as well, something that can be rare during the course of a campaign. So it's a great way to showcase for your stronger character strengths, pun fully intended. Play up their superstitions. Giants are an old race who still hold on to their religions and ways. Their rivalry with dragons is something that is eternal. Play into this with your giants when using them as NPCs. Before an encounter, have the giants accuse the players of aiding or spying for a great worm. Come up with odd superstitions that will scare them away or rituals that simply must come to pass. Giants are one of the oldest, if not the oldest race on Toril. Perhaps our superstitions are derived from them, like the ill omen that is a black cat crossing your path. Don't be afraid to have giants feel unreasonable and foreign to your players. Giants are not humans. They're not stupid, but that doesn't mean that if your players need something from them, that they would even care. Their world is their world, and humans or other small folk might seem insignificant to giants. You can really treat them like the tree folk from the Lord of the Rings series in this manner. It's not that they are completely incapable of reasoning with small folk. It's just that they may view small folk as either distrustful or their comings and goings as really completely irrelevant to a giant's life. Giants are fast, and this is a great tool as a dungeon master to create big, wide open combats with your players. Most giants move 40 feet, and they are quite capable of chasing fleeing players down or rushing casters who are trying to snipe them from a faraway distance. And giants also have a massive range. For example, a frost giant can move 40 feet and still proficiently hurl a rock at a player another 60 feet away at a +9 for 40, 10 + 6 bludgeoning damage. So even a bow ranger 100 feet away for the start of the round can easily get hammered if they're not careful. Remember, giants also have a much larger threatened area, and attacking over a fighter to crush the cleric or the little small folk that keeps using the magic words is very reasonable, and I wouldn't hesitate to give your giant something far more interesting than just a club or a great axe in that regard either. Give them a pike, give them a spear instead, and crank that reach up to 20 feet out. Even a shift that small will completely change a fight with a giant, as the giant suddenly and relentlessly is attacking the warlock or bard in the back trying to use healing word over and over, and simply reaching over the fighter who's trying to draw their attention. So be sure to play into these large ranges as much as you can. Giants can be every bit as clever as you might imagine, and setting up long distance traps and assaults is actually their preferred method of fighting. There's a lovely little quote in the Monster Manual 2 from 3rd edition that says, quote, "They favor massive weapons, especially two-handed ones, and wield them with impressive skill. They possess enough cunning to soften up a foe with ranged attacks before closing in if they can. A giant's favorite ranged weapon is just a big old rock." Last part was kind of paraphrased. I would have zero issue creating an overwhelming encounter for my players where several giants atop a hill defensively just hurl in these huge bullets at them to drive them off, especially if I wanted to demonstrate to my players just how dangerous and how hard-hitting these monstrosities can be. And I would probably create such an encounter with the thought that the giants wouldn't pursue the players if they decided to run away due to the lethality of it. Setting ambushes this way is fine. Just remember, you probably want to make sure not to surround your players and actually allow them room to escape. Otherwise, you might be setting your players up for a TPK. Another tip when employing giants in your D&D campaign is to be sure to give your giants smart goals. Now, it's okay to make their means to accomplish those goals perhaps a little rudimentary or ruthless, or even seemingly unconnected. But their goals should be more interesting than just "Kronk smash small folk for food." And speaking of methods, lean into their size. If giants are clashing with a village or a town, maybe they decide to dam off a river to dry up the town's food and water supplies. Maybe they could do the opposite and redirect a river in order to flood a valley. They are big enough, and with enough direction and teamwork, those things would honestly be extraordinary that they could accomplish. And finally, big dumb giants are okay, but avoid the default of the big dumb giant. Giants have a language, they worship deities, they live a long time and remember what Ostoria was still to date, the largest spanning empire ever on Toro. So shake things up with your giants and fight against that stupid stereotype. Instead, make your giants scholars and architects, have them sing and write their own poetry. Okay, and so now let's talk about maybe a few little ways to give your giants that little extra twist. To create giants your players have never seen before, even if they've been playing for decades and over multiple editions of the game. All right, the first little twist I have for you is to have them serve a demon lord. Giants, of course, are quite loyal to their lineages and the Allfather Anam, as well as many of the common deities you might find in your world. But rarely you find them tainted and twisted by the abyss. We talked about giving them smart goals earlier, but perhaps another approach to using them is to have them serve a dark, intelligent, devious demon master instead. Treat them like a warlock and consider what powers and new abilities they might be granted by their twisted dark masters. Maybe they begin to grow horns, develop sharp eyes for hunting at night, have their bones begin to grow and protrude into hardened spikes, or even have them grow wings or beaks like of rock. Dragons are terrifying, but how scary would horned flying giants be? How would these mutations allow them to assault a city? No longer do palisades serve as protection from a threat outside the city. Now the palisades look like a cage for panicked and desperate citizens. Speaking of mutations, another classic transformation is to grant your giants, who already have heavily elemental themes with fire and frost and stone giants, a more bestial form. What if your hill giants found a stone to grant them the speed of a cheetah or the tusks of a great boar? Barbarian tribes are known for their shaman transformational powers, granting them beast-like powers already, so I see no reason why a clan of frost giants couldn't present themselves with wolf-like, almost lycanthrope powers. basically enormous frozen werewolves clad in a mix of armor and white fur, or hell, polar bear frost giants that could sniff out the party for miles on the frozen tundra of Icewind Dale. And finally, the last little twist I have to maybe help get the wheels turning for you is to have your giants master the art of reducing their bulk to human sizes. Dragons walking among citizens in a city as a human or an elf is already a common trope in fantasy, and we've already become accustomed to Duergar growing in size in a pinch as well. But what if your giants could infiltrate society seamlessly, gather information, only to have them explode in size and fury when faced with accusations? Dungeon Masters could set up a great scene to introduce giants during a campaign by having a friendly NPC suddenly come to their aid during a tense fight with a dragon cultist and watch the player's jaw drop as the friendly courier Borbo is revealed to be an enormous stone-skinned giant. All right, so now I'm going to pass it over to you guys. The first question I have got to ask, the first question I've got to know is, what's everybody's favorite giant? Do you prefer fire giants or frost giants or stone giants, cloud giants, storm giants, hill giants, Etten, I guess count, ogres, definitely. What's your favorite giant? What's that giant that every time you see it, you're like, oh yeah, I've got some really great stories to tell with this one. That's what I want to know first. Second, what are some other ways or fun stories that you've seen giants used at the table? What are some interesting ways your Dungeon Master presented them? Have you ever used the fling attack with your giants? I want to know, because I got to tell you, I'm a pretty big fan. If this is your first time here and you love role-playing games as much as I do, I would love to have you subscribe. I put out videos on GM tips, player tips, tutorials, and more stuff just like this. So if that sounds like something you might be interested in, just hit that subscribe button right about there and come join us. I want to give a massive thank you to all of my incredible patrons over at welcomeadventures.com. Guys, thank you so much for what you do. It matters to me, it matters to my son, and because of you guys, I get to keep doing this. So thank you so much. If you guys like what you see here, you want to support more content like this and snag some rewards for yourself, maybe hop in a one-on-one meeting with me, welcomeadventures.com is a great way to do just that. Thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Cody, and may your games be filled with awesome memories and even better friends. I'll catch you guys next time.